Welcome back, viewers at home. Tonight we have the pleasure of speaking with Alie Komape, an advocate for Africa for Palestine, and a dedicated athlete who recently completed the 98th Comrades Marathon. While Ali's athletic accomplishment was a triumph in its own right, he also used this opportunity to champion the Palestinian cause as well as raise awareness for the struggles faced by fellow Palestinians. Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Komape. Jazakallah so much for joining us once again. Mr.
Alaikum
Kumape, are you
salam
with
and
us? Oh,
thank you for
alhamdulillah.
having me.
Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Kumape. Jazakallah so much for joining us.
Alaikum salam and thank you for having me.
Now, since you've done the 98th Comrades Marathon, can you tell us a bit on what really motivated you to run this marathon in question?
Um, Runners for Palestine is an international concept. So there's multiple people who run marathons all across the globe in raising awareness for Palestine. I started in 2019 after a number of Palestinian athletes visited the country from an organization called Right to Movement. This organization organizes what you call the Bethlehem Marathon. It's not really a marathon as such because Bethlehem is a tight area controlled by Israeli checkpoints and the apartheid wall. So what they do is just run around in loops until they get to 42 kilometers. So there is a group of people around the world who run for Palestine. Just like any other sport, athletics is also a platform to raise awareness. So just like they do in soccer, there's like they do in cricket. Athletics is one of those sports that people and activists who support Palestine use. Yeah.
And with that being said, how would you then describe the connection you feel between your personal athletic journey and the Palestinian struggle for self determination?
In many cases, people in sports don't necessarily do the sports only to raise awareness.
Mm-hmm.
It's also to show solidarity with Palestinian athletes who cannot participate in those sports because of Israeli apartheid and the Israeli oppression. If you can remember, during our struggle against apartheid, black players were not allowed to play rugby. Black players were not allowed to play cricket and soccer. Black players were not allowed in track and field. The popular Olympics protest by African athletes who said, athletes of track and field who said, we will not participate in this Olympics if apartheid South Africa is allowed to. This is to show solidarity at the time with South African athletes who could not participate in sports. So this is extremely personal at some level, yes, of course, like you said, but it also to show solidarity with Palestinian athletes.
I know last time we had a conversation around the Lot First 5, you had briefly mentioned this, but just to jog our memory, how do you think sports can actually be used as a tool for political as well as social change?
Of course, I think we base our activism on history. We base our activism on what has worked before in the past for X, and we try to make it work for Y. The anti-apartheid movement is what is a carbon copy of what Palestine's Soldiers movement is today. If you remember very well, it was the rugby players who could not play in New Zealand. Our rivalry between the All Blacks was there even during apartheid, when ordinary citizens and activists in New Zealand took glass bottles, crushed them, and sprayed them all over the field, that the rugby match could not continue. There was a slogan during that time that there no normal sport within a normal regime. So sports historically is being used for that. There's this notion that politics don't belong in sport. It's nonsense. Politics is in sports. There are many sporting codes that are influenced by politics, and we know very well. Even in this current moment right now, Russian athletes are banned from many sporting codes simply because of what Russia is doing in Ukraine. So there's no such thing as that, as sports, as politics don't belong in sports or such things. It's absolute nonsense.
And with that being said, what would you or how would you describe some of the pushbacks that you have faced for bringing politics into the sporting arena, be it directly or just indirectly?
We've had people tell us that your flag doesn't belong here. And look, no ordinary South Africans don't have a problem with the Palestine issue being raised in athletics, especially at the biggest stage in South Africa, the Comrades Marathon, the biggest ultra marathon in the world. Ordinary South Africans don't care about who say sports don't belong there. In fact, when running with the Palestinian flag from Maritzburg for the 90 kilometers down to Durban, there's massive support for Palestine across the road. People wake up in the morning at around 5 o'clock in the morning, put their camp chairs, their brass stands, with their coffee and tea in their hands, and when they see the Palestine flag, they chant and they give you a high five and so on. So South Africans don't really have an issue. It's the Zionists and a small pocket of Israeli sympathizers who have a problem with this. South Africans simply don't. And I think South Africans, they have this fresh in their minds that during our time of apartheid, sports was used to give solidarity to us, and sports was used to raise our issue internationally. Therefore, when we do it to others, it's only a debt we pay, a moral duty that we have. So we don't really have a resistance. We don't really have those who are against using sports for this or that humanitarian purpose. So it's only a small bunch.
And with that, Mr. Komape, with your permission, just a brief check-in. I remember last we did speak, as I mentioned earlier on the Loftus Five, which is a group that was arrested for carrying the Palestinian flag at a soccer match. And I think the last update that you gave us was the fact that they were still going through the court processes, as well as they were also looking forward to holding the law enforcement who is actually guilty of mishandling them to books. Now, can you give us a present day update in terms of what has happened since?
The Loftus Five appeared in court today. Their court date was today for trial. We've always said that the state does not have a case. There's nothing criminal that they did. There's nothing unlawful that we did. I was part of that particular group of people that loved us. There's nothing unlawful. There's nothing criminal that we did. The case was postponed again today, and we strongly feel that this case will be dismissed either, number one, by the prosecutor, who will realize that there is no case here, there's no evidence here, or by the magistrate, who will realize that no, these ones don't have a case, they are not presenting any evidence, they are not presenting any arguments. Therefore, the case is dismissed. So that case, we strongly believe it will be dismissed. The case against law enforcement, though, is continuing. We believe that investigations are at an advanced stage, and also we think that the police investigating the police takes some time. It is not necessarily when the police finds you with items in your shop for shoplifting and then says you're guilty of this or that. The independent director that looks into the police iPad does take some time. So we have that appreciation that it's going to take time, but the charges against them are continuing swiftly.
And with that being said, appreciating the efforts, are there any other approaches that you or Africa for Palestine or just individuals involved are going to be, using in ensuring that actually the case is being handled and the investigation is being done?
Of course, definitely. I mean, we've written also to the South African Human Rights Commission, if you remember. So the South African Human Rights Commission is looking into this. Like we said, we will get to the bottom of this. We will put our finger onto who was responsible for this, who made the call that we must be assaulted, pepper sprayed, beaten, and others arrested for simply raising the Palestinian flag in the stadium. So we are looking at different avenues. Of course, our legal team will advise as the time goes on that perhaps we must also look into other avenues. But at this particular point, it is the case lodged against the police. It is the case at the Human Rights Commission, and of course, there'll be others. We will announce other actions and measures as and when time continues in collaboration with our legal team.
Speaking about moving forward, what are your plans or plans for Africa for Palestine when it comes to, continuing the advocacy for Palestinian rights?
Africa for Palestine exists primarily for the Palestinian question, and I think that we have done some work, some good work over the years with our partners in South Africa. We just now came from the march to Gaza, and there are a number of programs that will be also embarking on the issue of isolating apartheid Israel, in the issue of raising Palestinian and awareness and so on. So we Africa of Palestine continues to do that. Of course, there are a number of important things that we like to bring attention to on the global stage. The International Court of Justice case of genocide against Israel, the International Criminal Court pursuing Netanyahu and his cronies. So we're looking into that, also working with our government closely to look into, for instance, the cases against South African citizens who participate in the Israeli Defense Forces. So the Africa of Palestine continues to do the work locally and internationally.
And just in closing, Mr. Komape, what words of or rather call to action would you share with South Africans or just citizens in terms of staying the cause and supporting, the Palestinian cause in question?
I always say let's keep the Palestinian question on our lips. Let's keep the conversation going on our dinner tables. Let's keep it going in our work lunch hours. It's only through that the Palestine will be. So we know this from experience, by the way. It was not some divine power from the up above that we got freedom from apartheid. It was action from the international community. It was the students in London who said we do not want to bang with parties that sponsors apartheid. It was the normal citizens of America who said Polaroid, the photo company that gives the photo businesses to the apartheid regime, we will not do business with you if you continue to fund apartheid South Africa. So this type of actions that will unilaterally, not unilaterally, excuse me, that will eventually assist in the liberation of Palestinians. So keeping Palestine on our lips, in our neighborhood WhatsApp groups, in our friends, with our friends and families. When we keep these conversations going, the actions will follow, and we know from our experience that oppression does not last, is unsustainable, but freedom is certain.
Hmm. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and Jazakala once again for really coming in and sharing with us an insight in terms of the, Comrades Marathon, as well as giving us an update on the Loftus 5 group in terms of how they've been and what's currently ongoing with their case. Jazakala so much.
Thank you for having us.
Viewers at home, that was my conversation with an advocate for Africa for Palestine who goes by the name of Alie Komape. And viewers at home, one of the highlights that we shared tonight was most importantly on the fact that sport can actually be used as a means of political and social change. But for now, let's head over to an break. We'll see you just after this.